One count of making a false statement. At this time, I'll take any questions. Before I entertain questions, I have to caution you that I cannot talk about the facts of this case. I can explain the procedure, the process, I can talk about any law, but I can't ethically get into the facts of this case before it is presented to a grand jury and goes to court.
Well, basically, the shooting.
We're presenting it to the grand jury for an indictment on felony murder, 2 counts of felony murder. And so, obviously, whenever a DA's office presents a case to the grand jury, the position of that office is that a crime was committed, and that is our position.
How did you reach the conclusion?
Same way we reach a conclusion in every case. We investigate the case, we speak with witnesses, we review evidence, we listen to tape statements if there are any. If there's any forensic evidence, we look at that. And at the end of the day, we have to make a decision. That's our job, and that's what we do, and that's in fact what we did in this case. Our decision was aided and assisted. Our decision was aided and assisted by the civil process through the regular grand jury. Some of you all local media may be familiar with the process that we use here in DeKalb County because we heard testimony, including Officer Olson's testimony in front of the civil grand jury. And that's not something that customarily happens in most criminal cases in Georgia. And so that helped out a lot.
Did he expose himself to, would his testimony give you some leads possibly in building a case?
Yeah, I can't really get into what he testified to. All I can say is that the civil grand jury, or the process of presenting the case to a grand jury for civil inspection, was helpful, and the grand jury's recommendation to do further investigation was helpful as well, because that's in fact what we did.
Mr. James, what did the fact that the civil grand jury couldn't reach a consensus say to you? I mean, are you ready to concede there's a lot of emotion in this case, or it's a tough call? Well,
2 things. There's always a lot of emotion whenever someone is killed. Okay, right now our country is on edge in cases where officers have shot and killed civilians, justified or not. It is it's a sensitive issue in the country right now. In terms of them not being able to reach a consensus, the only thing that I can tell you is what's presented in the document that the grand jury handed down in October, which was a request for our office to do further investigation to aid in making a decision on this case. And that's in fact what we've did. I myself have interviewed witnesses. I've been to the crime scene. I've reviewed every shred of evidence along with Nicole Golden, who's to my left, my chief assistant, and other members of our office. And at the end of that process, we had to do, in fact, what they asked us to do, which was make a decision. And our decision is that we're going forward on an indictment.
What was it about the shooting of Mr. Hill that the DA's office believes amounts to 2 felony murder counts?
Yeah, and that's not something that I can really get into at this point. All I can tell you is that our position is that the facts and the circumstances surrounding the shooting death of Anthony Hill warrant a charge for felony murder, and that's why we're presenting it to the grand jury and seeking charges on felony murder. Ultimately, it's going to be up to a grand jury as to whether or not Mr. Olson, Officer Olson, is charged with felony murder. That's not a decision that a DA can unilaterally make in Georgia, and that's a decision that a grand jury is going to have to make, and we intend to present the facts and the evidence, all the facts and all the evidence, witnesses included, to a grand jury and give them an opportunity to make that decision. But obviously, we would not be presenting it to the grand jury if we didn't believe it to be so.
There are discussions
Yes.
that are going on around the country. How did that factor into making your decision? And second question, what was the response of Mr. Alexander when you told him you were going to be looking at criminal charges?
Well, it doesn't factor into our decision at all. The job of a prosecutor is to seek justice. That's what we do. That's what we do every day. We do it in approximately 8,000 cases a year, and we're going to do it in this case. In terms of my conversation with Dr. Alexander, it was just more me notifying him of what we were planning to do. We have a good relationship. I keep him abreast of things that involve his department, and his response was, thanking me for the information, and some other things that we talked about that I'll probably let him talk to you about if he wants to divulge, but Dr. Alexander and I talk frequently.
Is this the most difficult call you've had to make?
No. I make difficult calls every day as DA. I look at facts, I look at evidence, and if the facts and the evidence warrant it, then justice requires that I make a decision, and this is a decision that justice requires that I make.
Why is it
Were you
two count-
going back and forth on, was there any question about whether you go with murder or maybe manslaughter? I mean, was that, or was it clear cut to you that this warranted murder charges?
You know, I can't really talk about our internal discussions between lawyers and investigators. The only thing that I can tell you is at the end of the day, our office, the consensus in our office, was that the most appropriate charge for us to seek was felony murder charges.
Why, Mr. James, why is it 2 counts of felony murder? Can you explain that?
Yeah, well, in Georgia, as in many states, cases are charged in what we call the alternative, which means you charge one set of circumstances in one incident in multiple ways, which gives a grand jury options on how they can indict, and also gives a what we call a petit jury or a regular jury of 12 options if a case reaches that far on how to convict or not.
Were there incidents in this officer's past that contributed to you know, what the case you're bringing?
And that's not something I can speak to at this point.
And one other thing, is it fair to say your case will be, I don't know, stronger is the right word, but obviously more enhanced than what was presented to the civil grand jury, that the criminal grand jury will be hearing different evidence?
Well, I wouldn't say different evidence. I would say perhaps more evidence. And with the civil review, what you have to understand is that we're not advocates. And I think this is what the public needs to understand. When we present a case for civil review, we're not advocating for a case to be indicted. We're not advocating for a case not to be indicted. We, you know, essentially call in one of our investigators and they give a synopsis of what took place. And we may present a use of force expert, and they may give a synopsis as well. But that grand jury you know, during the civil review does not hear evidence. They do not hear from all of the witnesses. When we're presenting a case, when we make a decision to present a case for an indictment, I am no longer a neutral. I become an advocate, and our office becomes an advocate. We've chosen a side at that point. And that is when, you know, we present all the evidence, and oftentimes we even present witness testimony, eyewitness testimony, and I expect that we'll do as much in this case. And so I wouldn't say that it would be different evidence. I would say it would be more evidence presented.
Officer Olson won't be testifying before.
He has that option under Georgia law to testify. Georgia law, the current state of Georgia law is that when officers are indicted, not only do they have to receive notice 15 days prior to the state seeking that indictment, which we did yesterday. We served him and his lawyer yesterday, but also they have an opportunity to present a statement, a sworn statement, and to present that statement last, and they are not subject to cross-examination either.
Do they have to tell you that in advance, or?
We don't have to notify him of Georgia law, but I'm certain his lawyer would be aware of it, and that is the current state of Georgia law. And so Officer Olson will have an opportunity to testify, to give a statement, to speak to the grand jury. It will be sworn if he chooses to do so, and it will be the last thing that they hear, and he will not be subject to cross-examination pursuant to Georgia law.
So it's fair to say this will be a tougher process through the grand jury to get than typical. I mean, because obviously the average citizen doesn't have those privileges.
It is under Georgia law. Our legislature has seen fit to give officers more rights in front of a grand jury than an average citizen. That is a correct assessment of the situation. Again, I am a lawyer. I am the DA, and I am bound by Georgia law, and we will conduct this proceeding pursuant to Georgia law.
When was the last time the prosecutor's office here has sought a murder indictment against himself?
It would have been Terry Thompson, which would have been, I believe, 2009, perhaps, maybe 2009, 2010. I'd have to go back and look at the records. It was a case that where the officer was indicted for, I believe, felony murder or even murder, and the case was reversed on what we call the Garrity issue by the Georgia Supreme Court. You know, and I can get into Garrity if you guys care, but I'm certain that you don't at this point. So,
when will the grand jury's term convene?
The grand jury has already started. It's a January-February term, and so this will be approximately halfway through their term. Their term ends at the end of February, the beginning of March.
So that's when they'll render a decision?
No. This is not like the civil presentment where it's at the end of the term. This is like every other indictment. When we present the case that day, When they're done, they will make a decision, and either they will true bill the case, which means Officer Olson will be indicted, or they will no bill the case, which means that he has not been indicted. But you will know that day on January the 21st.
If the grand jury true bills it for indictment, how confident are you that your office can get a conviction against the officer?
Well, you know, I'm not going to get into how confident I am about an individual case. The only thing that I'll say is that we don't seek indictments on people that we don't believe, well, how do I phrase this? We don't seek indictments where we don't believe the facts and the circumstances are present and the information is available for us to present to a jury to have a positive outcome. Yeah.
Last question.
Have you made a decision on the Kevin Davis case?
Have not.
Any idea when that are you closing in on one, or?
Well, let me finish this first.
All right, thank you.
All right.
Or does she want to talk right
Yeah,
here?
Bridget would like to make a quick
Yeah, she can do right here. Oops. She can do right here. It'd be great. Sorry.
Hi everyone. Thank you all for being here today. Just thank you guys for all of the prayers and, you know, keeping his story alive. His family and I are very elated with the decision of the indictment, especially with the murder charges against Officer Olson. Officer Olson killed my best friend, my boyfriend. He was an amazing person, and we're coming up on 10 months since his death. And I didn't think that this was going to happen just because of all of the other cases like Tamir Rice and Sandra Bland. They've been on my mind for months now, and I wake up crying in the middle of the night about them, and especially about Anthony. And just knowing that we did get an indictment, we're going to be all right, just like Kendrick Lamar's song. I mean, I blasted that maybe 20 times this morning, and it's just surreal right now. I can't really put it into words how excited I am. But I just want everyone to know that Anthony Hill was a veteran. He was completely naked. He was most definitely unarmed, and I'm glad that the DA came to the decision of this, and I'm glad that, you know, we have an officer off the streets who he murders people because he's hiding behind a badge. And just very excited and, you know, thankful, very, very thankful.
So you understand that the indictment actually hasn't happened, just the DA says that he wants to take it to a grand jury to get an indictment, and we've seen across the country how difficult it is for grand juries to return actual indictments against police officers. How prepared are you for the process and for a decision that may or may not result in an indictment for Officer Olson?
Right, so it's just one step closer because, you know, a lot of cases haven't reached this point, but I'm very open-minded about an indictment, and, you know, I'm just praying and hoping that they do make the right decision.
How does Anthony, have you spoken with Anthony's mom about this? She's not here. What's her reaction?
Yes, she's very elated as well. When I heard the news, I immediately called her, and she was very excited. She's actually, you know, back home in Charleston right now, sick with a cold, but she called me, we talked for about an hour, and just very, very elated about, you know, the steps taken forward in this process.
Where do you go from here? Where's the tracks at? Where do you go from here?
Going to keep working, going to keep protesting, going to keep his story alive. Definitely have to keep his spirit alive and just let everybody know what kind of person he was. and also let people know that he's not just some unarmed naked man like a lot of people reference him as. He does have a name, and his name's Anthony Hill.
Will you say and spell your name for us and tell us who you are?
Bridget Anderson, girlfriend of Anthony Hill, Bridget, last name Anderson, Anderson.
You get the names of other people out there just for the picture, say.
Colonel King, Amos King.
Earl King? Sorry.
Amos.
Amos King, sorry.
Are you friends of the family, or friends of?
Well, me?
Yeah.
I'm with Justice for Veterans.
Okay.
I'm retired with the colonel now.
Would you like to say a few words?
If you want
about
me
this?
to.
Amos King?
Yeah.
Traditional spelling?
Amosking.
Justice, did you know?
Didn't know Anthony Hill. Talked to his mom, Attorney Chestnut, and we got involved because we're dealing with other cases also that, and dealing with veterans. It's a very unfortunate situation here that we're dealing with. That this is one that is in a lot of places being dealt with. We're dealing with the root of the problem. What caused Anthony Hill to disrobe? His medication. So we are addressing the VA with those issues right there, along with the Keisha Holmes case with the young lady who committed suicide and killed her 3 kids. Something that's causing veterans to act the way they are acting. So along with the legislator and the law enforcement, we plan to meet to sit down and talk. How can we stop the next case from happening? Because most likely it's going to happen again with a veteran disrobing with bad medication. Anthony Hill suffered from PTSD. He was bipolar. So something caused that to happen to him.
Would you say that the VA failed him, would you say?
Yes, the VA failed him.
And this happens to so many veterans, but not
Many
to this
times.
degree.
Not to this degree, it failed him. Thank you.
Mr. King.
Y'all's names too, just for the
Oh,
picture.
my name is Eric Eccles, Echols. I'm with the Chestnut firm and as investigator.
ERIC or K?
ERIC, ECHOLS.
My name is Jewel Lassiter. I'm an associate attorney with the Chestnut firm. I represent